vaccine on the health of the recipient. Now that everyone ages 12 and older is eligible for COVID-19 vaccines, more than half of all Americans are fully vaccinated, according to the CDC. This includes more than 61% of Americans ages 18 and older. Data from VAERS shows that in the 30 days following a second dose of an mRNA vaccine, there was an elevated number of cases of myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, in people ages 16 to 24. Secondly, I want to talk about the college education. An NBC News analysis of more than 800 colleges and universities that are requiring the COVID-19 vaccination found that the vast majority have unclear directives, loopholes, or legal complications that are leaving professors frustrated, students unmotivated, and has robbed students of a traditional college experience. Online classes are not meant for everyone, and it should not be a choice between online or vaccination. Next, I want to talk about how it's unnecessary to mandate vaccines in colleges. Students range from the age of 18 to 24, therefore they are not an at-risk group for COVID-19. Even if they were, the vaccine itself is not like most other vaccines. It is not 100% effective, and you are still able to contract and spread the virus. Even if a vaccine mandate was implicated, that would not include the booster shots needed 6 months after receiving the vaccine itself. Therefore, mandating the vaccine would be useless after just 6 months. CDC. Most college students have already received the vaccine, and for each institution where vaccination rates were available, the compliance rate for faculty and on-campus students exceeded 90%. That's including Harvard, Yale, Brown, Dartmouth, and Cornell. With this in mind, it is apparent that it would be overkill to mandate a vaccine that has already been taken by the majority of students and staff in colleges and universities. If the need for a vaccine mandate is to reduce deaths by COVID and assist hospitals, then there is really no need for that anymore. As of the past week, according to Healthline, deaths declined and hospitalizations remained steady. As can be reasonably expected in an era of increasingly polarization in the politics in the United States, the idea and question of a proposed vaccine mandate has become increasingly drawn along party lines. Although passion and enthusiasm has long been a staple of American politics, the solution may not be ever harsher enforcement, but instead respect and explanation. These points, when taken as a whole, serve to construct a compelling argument against the proposed adoption of a COVID-19 vaccine mandate for all public colleges and universities. Okay, so I noticed that you said students are under a lot of stress and anxiety from the outbreak, but creating the mandate is only giving them more stress, isn't it? Because of the decision between school and the mandate, getting the vaccine.
No, not really, because there's the online choice for online classes through Zoom, and you're not putting other people at risk. And I want to ask you a question regarding the liberty, how you're taking away the constitutional liberty when you're putting other people at risk and putting them exposure to the virus. How can that overrule public safety and health when you're doing liberty, when it affects everybody else's freedom?
Well, like I said before, we are not an at-risk group, this age group, and
but people still get affected, even after not.
Even with the vaccine, people can still get it, and also, as I mentioned before, there are over 90% of students and faculty have already been vaccinated, so it'd just be overkill to do a mandate and just force everyone else to.
And I have another question. For the booster shots, you said, why is the vaccine mandate even have to be in store because of the booster shots you have to get? Well, the original vaccine is still effective against the virus according to the CDC, so.
But not after 6 months.
After 6 months, but the booster shot is still effective, because you won't affect.
But the mandate wouldn't include the booster shot, would it?
It can later on if colleges and.
To my knowledge, this wasn't about booster shots. It was just about a vaccine mandate.
And another thing, when you're saying, I have a question about how it's not, people are not trusting the new vaccine because of the side effects. Well, in the past, there's been other vaccines where there's been side effects, but vaccines have still been mandated.
Yes, those vaccines that are being mandated are 100% effective, and they don't require booster shots, though.
Okay, and then,
Okay. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, thank you very much.
Could you project so that I can hear you?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, my name is Gianfranco Ladaga, and I will be continuing arguments for the affirmative. So first I'd like to go over some of the major points of the negative. They mentioned the right to bodily autonomy, so let's talk about that. The right to bodily autonomy is a substratum of the right to privacy described in Griswold versus Connecticut in 1965, which concluded that although the Constitution does not explicitly protect the right to privacy, it is implied by the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth Amendments. Furthermore, no explicit right to bodily autonomy has ever been established, although bodily autonomy as a concept is usually acknowledged and respected in the court system. Cases detailing the right to privacy include Griswold, Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey, Cruzan versus Director, Missouri Department of Health, and Lawrence versus Texas. I'd like to talk more about Cruzan because it's something that the negative outright mentioned. The right to refuse medication, as they mentioned, is one established in Cruzan versus Director, Missouri Department of Health. However, what the negative fails to recognize is that the specific phrasing used in this institution of this right is the refusal of life-saving hydration and medication, specifically applying to technical support to life such as life support and aid. It is also specified in the court trial that this does not extend to the usage and implementations of vaccines. All of these cases cite that although the right to privacy is a right that is recognized, it is not a fundamental one. Cases such as Casey and Cruzan even go as far as to say that the right to privacy and bodily autonomy are only applicable when no third parties are inherently involved or at risk, meaning that in a situation where you could potentially infect and indirectly harm, hospitalize, or even kill someone else, the right to bodily autonomy is not applicable. Furthermore, a right may be superseded in the case of a health crisis. Claiming that a right on its own can immunize an individual from a law or mandate is not how things have ever worked in this country. Moving on, their statistic on 90% vaccination rates in a college does not apply to the entire college population. This is a limited scope to specific control groups that not every single college is 90% vaccinated. We cannot apply this statistic when we are talking about a nationwide institution of mandates. They also claim that mandating other vaccines are 100% effective and do not include booster shots. However, there is clear evidence that this is not true. Let's talk about the flu shot. The flu shot is a shot for the flu in every strain that comes every year. The reason we take a flu shot every year is because there are new strains that come out every year, meaning that the vaccine has never been 100% effective. Let's also move on to talk about why the vaccine is not new and it is safe. They contend that all vaccines need time to become effective, and this is true. We agree. However, vaccines are never old when implemented, and we don't contend that the COVID vaccine is entirely new. Let's look at the Center for Disease Control's data log of past pandemics and epidemics. Polio pandemic began in 1949. The vaccine was invented by Dr. Jonas Salk in 1953 and distributed nationwide by the end of 1955, which ended the polio pandemic. That's a 2-year gap between invention and distribution. The diphtheria pandemic, which peaked in 1921, vaccine invented in the mid-20s, the CDC doesn't specify a year, and distributed nationwide by 1930. That leaves us with a range of at minimum 2 years and at maximum 5 years between invention and deployment. The influenza pandemic, also in the 1920s, vaccine invented 1938 and applied in 1940, also paved the road for the invention of the polio vaccine, which leads me to a follow-up point. The COVID vaccine is not recent at all. In fact, we can highly compare it to the variety of flu strain vaccines. The original flu vaccine in 1918 laid the groundwork for the influenza one in 1938, which laid even more foundation for the polio vaccine in 1953. This is how most vaccines work. The polio vaccine wasn't a vaccine that was made in the 4 years that polio was a threat. It was made through the work, research, and effort spanning almost 40 years to be applied to a new problem. Similarly, the COVID-19 vaccine was a speedy one because it began research in 2013, when CDC researchers were fighting against RVA, which is a child-borne respiratory illness. The groundwork and research proved invaluable to COVID research and sped up the process of creating a vaccine exponentially. This isn't a vaccine that was made yesterday and applied today. It's one that has a full history spanning years of research and groundwork that culminates in a modern solution for a modern problem. Solving a nationwide pandemic is not something we as a country take lightly. We would not implement a vaccine that doesn't outweigh any impacts or harms. An assumption of that only reflects a lack of research. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, so encouraging the vaccine is a much more sufficient way to go about things rather than activating the personal liberty culture wars that result in people becoming more entrenched in their opposition. This statement I just made can be compared to incentive, yes, enforcement. For example, if you incentivize giving a class to college students for free if they get vaccinated, they're more likely to do so and be up for the idea rather than when you lawfully force them to do so, emphasis on force. The notion that we have to vaccinate every living, walking American and eventually all newborns in order to control the pandemic is based on the false assumption that the risk of dying from COVID-19 is equally distributed in the population. We also know that it is not common for the virus to hurt someone that is young and healthy. Natural immunity is also another factor to take into account and think about. Our bodies develop antibodies to the entire surface of the virus. The power of natural immunity was actually recently affirmed in an Israeli study that I actually have the link to here, which found that 6.7 times greater level of protection among those with natural immunity is compared to vaccinated immunity. A Cleveland Clinic study also found that vaccinating people with natural immunity did not add to their level of protection at all. It did nothing for it. The goal of our pandemic should be to reduce death, illness, and disability, but instead, what's happening with these vaccine mandates is a movement being morphed from pro-vaccine to vaccine fanaticism at all costs. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the risk of hospitalization from COVID-19 in kids ages 5 to 17 is 0.3 per million. On top of that, taking kids who decline vaccination and preventing them from getting an in-person education is a harsh penalty, and in all honesty, probably makes the situation much worse. If you think about it, those kids are probably still going to step out and go places as well as see their friends, whether they're homeschooled or not. So the likelihood of controlling the spread the way that it's expected with this mandate is slim. On top of that, we're taking the risk with setting these school students for failure. Many kids, like myself, suffer with ADHD or ADD or other learning disabilities that makes it extremely hard for them to be able to focus when they're not in an actual school setting or with an in-person teacher. And on top of that, there are a lot of programs and classes that are not offered online. Some are almost impossible to learn and do online as well, like a majority of science and even journalism classes, for example. I used to be a broadcast journalism student, and when COVID hit, my major basically took a major pause because we needed hands-on equipment for that class, and we had to do stuff in person to learn and succeed, so that whole major took a pause. Vaccine mandates can't end the spread of the virus as effectiveness declines and new variants emerge. So how can a mandate be accessible? How can a mandate be a sensible policy? With a mandate, we're consigning tens of millions of people to an indeterminate number of boosters and the threat of job and education loss if it isn't clear that more doses will stop the spread either. Diminished education and job losses can impact future careers, attainment, happiness, marriage, and net worth, which in itself is a powerful determinant of crime, poverty, and depression. Tensions have also increased as vaccine mandates have become talked about and implemented, and this can cause much divide, whether it finds its way to be about politics, race, or just people in general, so we're completely dividing our nation. Human and nature and psychology is to be greatly considered with this mandate. New research based on surveys in Germany suggests that a vaccine mandate might send psychological signals that actually hinder overall compliance. People resent being manipulated, an effect known as controlled diversion. People don't like being told what to do. Coercion also tends to cause moral disengagement, which makes people tune out and not want to do what you're asking them to. And forced vaccination also undermines trust between citizens and their institutions, as they wonder why coercion is even necessary, and it makes people ask questions. Instead of getting more people vaccinated, the mandate has focused attention on legal battles and constitutional issues as well. For example, Utah is one of the 12 states that have sued to challenge the president's authority to issue such a mandate. Losing the fight to require the vaccine would be worse than never having attempted to mandate it in the first place. A feel-good campaign to urge vaccination as a civic duty rather than being bogged down in a mandate in these legal battles while the virus continues would be a much more beneficial way to go about this situation. I'm going to go back and talk about the education problem one more time. On top of the effects of the mandate caused when it takes away the right to a proper in-person education, it does not mention anything about boosters. Therefore, if the vaccine is mandated, it will be pointless after 6 months because there is a need for a booster shot in order for the vaccine to continue to be effective. The vaccine reduces but doesn't prevent transmission. Based on a large study of more than 300,000 people in the UK, protection from the vaccine is shown to wane over time, more noticeably after 3 to 4 months.
All right, I would like to ask, how old would you say, because we were talking about that our age range is, more prepared to combat the virus than other age ranges. How old does someone have to be to warrant caring about their health?
In a situation where we're being mandated to get a vaccine, I think worry should only be for people that are much older,
How much is much older?
like 60 and up.
Okay. Can young people get sick though?
Yeah, but it's unlikely.
Can they be harmed by this virus?
Yeah.
Have we been getting harmed by
a
this
lot
virus?
of you can be harmed in by a lot of other viruses like the flu and other things.
Yes, you're right. But
Yeah.
have we been getting harmed by this virus?
Yeah.
Right. So, what is the contention of us being young having more of a chance than other people have to do with ignoring the young people and only focusing on older people? Why don't we just protect everyone?
Well, your first speaker mentioned the Supreme Court ruling in Massachusetts, but that is not federal. That is only for the state. How does that ruling relate to a federal mandate since state laws are different from federal laws?
Right, of course. So Jacobson versus Massachusetts was experiencing a current outbreak of polio. And so because the state mandated a vaccine, Massachusetts challenged that, and the Supreme Court eventually said that yes, in an event of a public health crisis, an individual's will might be superseded to protect the grand scheme of things, which is the public health of the entire country. So in this case, it was the state of Massachusetts. But now we're experiencing a global pandemic, which requires a national solution.
But that was only for Massachusetts,
Right, but because it's a Supreme Court case, the precedent still stands that in a case of a public health crisis, individual liberty can be superseded in the presence of a public health crisis.
Yes, but there's not been a federal ruling yet, has there?
There has, yeah. The Supreme Court is a federal ruling.
You also mentioned that the flu shot is a contradiction.
So new research on the COVID-19 safety on college campuses published in the Annals of Internal Medicine finds that the high vaccination rates will be the single most powerful determinant of campus safety this fall. So this vaccination should be mandated because of in order for us to go back to having to go to being able to do the stuff that we do on campus throughout the years, like going to football games and also other social events. We need this vaccine so we can be able to feel safe. A lot of people say that the original vaccine isn't safe because we have these new boosters. Well, the original vaccine is still effective. It's just there's a lot of people that decide not to be vaccinated, and that's what develops these new strains that sometimes it isn't. The original vaccine isn't very much effective, so we got to come up with these boosters. But the original vaccine is still very much effective. So this shows that as to why we need to be vaccinated. And the negative was arguing how the FDA hasn't approved any of these vaccinations and how any of these vaccinations aren't safe. Well, the FDA has approved all 3 vaccinations already, so this shows to prove why we should get vaccinated already. And so the FDA gives approval, full FDA approval gives a lot of comfort to leaders that they should be able to go and require them and keep their communities, employees, faculty, staff safe. Christina Johnson, the president of the Ohio State University, where a vaccine mandate has already been installed. So this vaccine even gives like the presidents and leaders of the campuses ensures them that the whole community will be safe. And that's all on behalf.
Can we take 2 minutes?
Okay, so that was the affirmative defense. Next is the negative defense.
Yeah, they're keeping track of time right now.
Oh, okay. Thanks
Yeah,
for
you're
telling me I
good,
didn't
you're
know.
good.
I'd like to take the next few minutes to clarify and reiterate our stance on the resolution. All public colleges and universities should adopt COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Our team firmly believes that not all colleges or public universities should require their students to be forced to get the vaccine. I want to make one thing for certain. We are not against the vaccine, but we are against a hiring entity such as a public college or university mandating that someone should get vaccinated. The first thing that I want to reiterate that our team brought up is by enforcing the mandate, you would be violating the 14th Amendment stated in the Constitution that says no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. To require someone to get vaccinated is taken away from their freedom and liberty to choose what they should do in their body given by the Constitution. If public colleges were to mandate vaccinations on students, they would be violating the Constitution and violating the rights of students and their livelihoods. And our opponents are okay with that freedom being violated. Aside from colleges potentially violating someone's rights by mandating a vaccine, like we brought, there are really no clear definitions of what that vaccine mandate really includes. We brought up, does that include the booster shots? And y'all said, you kind of made our point by saying that the original vaccine wouldn't be as effective after 6 months, and that's why you need a booster. And that's what we're saying. We're saying that that's why this mandate would not really be effective. It's not really clear because of the original vaccine not being as effective. We also kind of talked about the vaccines that are already mandated in colleges, and I would say that those vaccines, the reason why they are mandated, is because we've seen the long term of those vaccines, and they're only like a one-time shot and you're good for a couple years. The COVID-19 vaccine is not a one shot, you're good for however long. You have to get the booster shots over time to keep that immunity up. You also brought up the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is a yearly shot, like you said, a seasonal shot, but that's not required to go to school. And so we don't think, neither should the COVID-19 should be required as well. By colleges mandating the vaccine, they're holding their academic careers hostage. What do I mean by that? From a USA Today article, students who don't follow college COVID-19 vaccines are starting to face consequences, and some schools are imposing extra punishments. Quinnipiac University in Hampton, Connecticut announced that along with fining unvaccinated students, it would start to cut off their on-campus Wi-Fi access, and now that schools are starting to disenroll the unvaccinated students. They're making students between their academic career and getting vaccinated. And you brought up like going to online school. We've been on online school before. It's not really as effective as being in person. And being in programs such as nursing programs, welding programs, art programs, you cannot really do those programs online. You have to be in person for those. So now if you're holding someone, you have to get a vaccine to participate. Now you're saying